Hello, and welcome to this technical session. Together, we are going to see how to secure an application without any development, just by using Apache APISIX and Keycloak. I'll be your host today. My name is Philippe, and I'm a contributor on Apache APISIX. So in more detail, we are going to use Kubernetes, Apache APISIX, APISIX Ingress Controller, and Keycloak. And we are going to see how we can secure in depth our application without having to code anything. And our application, believe me, doesn't know anything about OIDC, authentication, or authorization. And we are going to do so by using the amazing connection of Apache APISIX and Keycloak. So we are going to see what could be the expectation or why this approach. What is the architecture and having the walkthrough on all the configuration for our demonstration. And well, we are going to see how to secure the application and of course, a demo. So speaking of expectation, why could you just simply update the code and add the OIDC authentication and authorization directly at the application level? Well, if you can do it, if you have the team to do it, you should probably do it. But there are many cases where you just cannot have this approach. For instance, when you are reusing application or legacy development, you can't always update the code and include any depth security using modern protocol. Or in terms of organization, you don't want your developer to spend too many times on the security or, for instance, the deployment of the application, Kubernetes, exposition of metrics, and so on. But you rather them focus on, well, having the best microservices architecture or building the best business feature. And to do so, you want to rely on an external solution to implement the security. You may also be in a phase where you are building an MVP and you don't want to spend too much effort on the first iteration on security, but you still don't want to expose your application. Or maybe you don't have the team to make some technical or security watch to detect severe breach and then quickly update the code and redevelop solution. And you rather rely on a third-party application where there is this team existing inside the organization of this application. So you just want to have to update the application. It's so much easier. And well, the key result of this session is that we are going to have an application running inside Kubernetes and fully secure. So in terms of architecture, so we are going to see a little bit of what is deployed for the demonstration and having a walkthrough of all the configuration parts. So for this demo, it's running on a KEIN cluster with basic configuration and basic exposition bound to Apache APISIX. APISIX in this case is deployed using the Helm charts. So we got Apache APISIX, the Ingress controller, and APISIX dashboards. We also have Keycloak that is deployed using the Bitnami Helm charts, and of course our mockup application, which is composed of one front end, which will mockup a library, will have different kind of people interacting differently with our application, and we have a Go API that will handle and store information. Well, we're going to see a little bit about the configuration here. So first of all, we're talking about the KEIN configuration and deployment of Apache APISIX, our application, and then we are going to focus on Keycloak. And there are some missing parts of the configuration that we are going to do together during this session. All resources are available on my GitHub repository, so feel free to fork them and use them as much as you want. Okay, so now let's see more in detail our configuration. So here is the configuration for the KEIN cluster. Pretty straightforward. We are exposing two ports that will be bound to our Apache APISIX deployment. Well, speaking of, this is the deployment of our Apache APISIX solution. So I can see here, this is the exposition of the port that is bound to our GOUIN clusters. And well, that's pretty much it. We are enabling the deployment of the dashboard, and we are enabling the deployment of the ingress controller as well. But yeah, not too many configuration at this part. This is the configuration for our Keycloak deployment. Well, in this case, there are a little bit more of configuration because what we want is Apache APISIX to have the SSL termination. So actually, Keycloak won't be the one terminating its SSL. So for Keycloak, we want him to say we are going to expose stuff using HTTP, yes, because if we're already using HTTP and termination of APISIX with HTTP, yeah, there will be a mismatch of configuration at some point, and some file won't be loaded correctly. But besides that, not too many configuration. Well, you can see here that we can also inject the configuration of a realm at deployment, but there is also a JSON file inside the repository that contain all the configuration for the realm. So I rather suggest that you use a JSON file rather than injecting the realm at the deployment level. And yeah, we are going to expose our Keycloak application using APISIX root. So this is a custom resource definition that is read by the APISIX ingress controller, and that is going to translate this information into upstream and root at the APISIX level. Then we have our front-end application that is, well, deployed using native Kubernetes deployment configuration. So we have our deployment, we have our exposition inside the cluster, and an upstream for APISIX. So same here, that's a custom resource definition that is read by the APISIX ingress controller, and that is translated directly in an upstream configuration at APISIX level. Because, well, what I like is to have everything declared inside Kubernetes and not rely too much on having to curl some solution to define exposition at APISIX level. So yeah, that's why the APISIX ingress controller is not really a proper ingress controller per se, but it's just more about a controller that reads serially for APISIX. And we have our Go API that is exposed using, well, the same philosophy that our front application. So the deployment, the service, and upstream. And then we have our scenario, but we are going to keep that for later. Okay, so let's go back to our slide. So we have seen the configuration of the GOUIN cluster, the APISIX deployment. One thing to know is that we have a certificate that is injected at APISIX level to terminate the SSL. And now we are going to focus on the Keycloak configuration. So in Keycloak, actually, we are going to define two users. We are going to define one which will be an editor and one which will be an author. So let's create a new user. Let's name it Frank. And well, he's an author, so why not naming an author? Okay, so now we have our two users that is created. And well, we only have one group, and I want, well, saying that people in the editor will be in the editor group and author will be in the author group. So I'm going to create an author group. And I'm going to add John inside. Oh, sorry, and I'm going to add Frank inside the author group. Yeah. And well, for the sake of the demonstration, I will set up the password for this user. And voila. Okay, so we have 2 users and 2 groups, and our users are bound to the appropriate group. So now let's talk about the client's configuration. So it's already created here. Basically, what is very important here is to set up the access type. The access type should be confidential and authorization should be enabled. Of course, there is some very important field to configure. It's all the URL and URIs to expose the application. And then you should have this authorization types. So this is where all the authorization and security of our APIs will rest. So we have the resource part where we are going to protect our API and define all the paths of our API. So we can actually at this point protect even subpaths of our application. We have the authorization scope. So you can see here, this is more like the HTTP method, and that will be bound into the plugin used by Apache APISIX. So here, just for the sake of the demonstration, I just set up 3, but you can imagine that, of course, you will have all of them, bird, patch, and so on. We'll have our policies. So we are going to define what kind of group is entitled to what action. And we'll have our mapping between policies and resources. So at the end, we'll have some group that will be allowed to perform some HTTP method at some API. So as you can see here, we are missing some of configuration. So for instance, we have defined that only some users can create author, only some users can list author, some users can list book, but how about the creation of a book? So let's add it. And of course, an author is the one that should be creating a book. Here. So if we take a little bit closer look at what we have here. So we have only people that can create new author or reference new author. And obviously that's the role of an editor. This is the one that we just created. And for listing author right now, well, I want to say that, yeah, I want everyone at this point to be able to list the author. And that's the same, actually, for the books. I want everyone to be able to list books. And finally, we are going to create our resource-based mapping. So we are going to link the creation of books. And we're going to take a look. So yeah, we have, okay, create author mapping, resources is create author, and user, only user and group can create author. This one is correct. We'll create book that we just create, list author, all right. And this book, well, and voila, we just have set up our securization, and as you can see, we have defined what kind of user are entitled to make some action inside our API, and even using some get post method. And we are able to create users, add them to the group, and directly it's managed by our client. So that's great at this point. Okay, so now, well, I think it's time for the demo. Okay, so the first scenario, we are going to simply expose our application for now. So, well, like I said, instead of having to curl Apache APISIX to create the upstream and root, I prefer to use some custom resource definition to have everything declared at Kubernetes level and let the APISIX ingress controller do the magic for me. Since it's kind of a microservices architecture, our backend and frontend is not served by the same server. So we need to enable some plugin at the backend level to allow some cross-origin request sharing. So let's see this. So now we are going to apply. Okay, so let's see what is behind our root here. So we have some simple rule to expose our front application. And we have the route that will be exposing our core API server. And as you can see here, we have the plugin that is enabled to allow some CORS request. Okay, let's apply them to our cluster and deployment and see if we can actually access our application. Okay, so previously I did not have access to anything because the root wasn't declared at APISIX level. And now, yeah, I have access to my application. Awesome. So here we have the listing of author, we have the listing of books. We can add new books and we can add new author. Well, let's add Frank as an author. Yay! So we successfully add a new author. Can we add a book? Normally, yes. Yeah, we can add a book, but actually everyone can. Everyone with access to the application can create new author, can create new books, and everything will be listed here. So there is not security at all at this level. The other thing that we can see is that, yeah, it's exposed using HTTPS with our custom certificate that is handled by APISIX side. So, okay, so now, well, it's time to secure our application. So for that, we are going to use two plugins. The first one will be at the front application level, and will handle the generation of the token using Keycloak and redirecting us to Keycloak for the login part. And the second one will use the host Keycloak plugin, which is amazing, and will protect the Go API server. And here we are going to use two different fields in this plugin to leverage the power of the authorization tabs that we have just configured inside Keycloak. Okay, so let's take another look to our route here. So now for the exposition on our front application, we see that we have a new plugins enabled here, which is the OpenID Connect one. And we are going to say, hey, please use this discovery URL, use this client, this secret, and I want you to generate the token for me and redirect the application for me if there isn't like a session cookie or something like that inside the request. And the second one is our protection of the Go API. So here we can see that we still need this course plugin, and now we have this auth Keycloak plugin with our two field configure here to use everything that we have configured in the authorization tab of Keycloak. But it's still pretty straightforward configuration. It's not really as complicated. And well, normally, by using this two file, we are going to completely secure our application. So let's see this in action. Okay, so now let's apply our configuration file and our route to protect our application. And let's go back to our application and see what has changed. Normally, if I refresh, yay, I'm redirected to Keycloak because I don't have an existing session token or cookies within my session to directly log me into the application. So I need to first log against Keycloak to access my application. And voila. So that means that at least our first plugin is working well. And now, in order to have access to the application, I need to be logged in my why not identity provider, the identity access solution, or just the user inside Keycloak, but I need to exist somewhere. But we have configured some API protection, in-depth security. So normally, I'm Frank, I'm an author, so I shouldn't be entitled to add another author to the list. Well, let's see this. Uh, let's say I want to register John as an author. Yeah. So here, I get a 403 response, which means that I'm not allowed to perform this action. So actually, you can see here that we have changed the behavior of our application and we have changed anything in the code of our application. So that means that to be able to add an author in the listing, I need to be logged in as an editor. So now Frank actually should be able to add new books because he's an editor, he's an author, sorry. Let's add volume 2. Yeah, Frank is actually able to add a new books. So for this part of our permission and policies, it's working pretty well. So now let's see if I log in using John, I'll be able to add a new editor to a new editor to the listing. Okay, so for that, I'm going to use incognito mode because, well, when you are playing with IDC, you will have some cookies that will stay hidden in some places and you will be automatically logged in. That's the purpose of the single sign-on solution. So let's use John here and logged into application. So John is able to, list the author, list the books, and normally add a new author, but isn't allowed to add books. So let's try that. Yeah, you can do that. Can you write Frank volume 3? Hmm. No, of course. He's not allowed to do that. So as you can see here, based on the group, we have successfully secured our application. But, well, we can play a little bit more with Keycloak here. So let's say that the author listing is actually some sensitive information, and we don't want anyone to be able to list them. Yeah, sorry. So actually, I don't want everyone to be able to list the author. Actually, I want only an editor to be able to do that. So normally I can revoke right here. So let's do it. So now only editor can list author. That means here that if I refresh the page, yeah, my user is now allowed to list the author because it contains sensitive information. So, and I didn't even need to reconnect or reload in because it's all managed by the plugin. So actually my token is still valid, but the right associated to this token has changed. So we can dynamically change the behavior of our application and the security of our API without having to force the user to reload or to, well, modify its user experience at this point. So this is actually something really amazing. So thank you for staying with me. Feel free to reach out if you have any question. You have my LinkedIn account, my GitHub account. Again, all resources are available inside my repository. And well, I hope you've learned a couple of things. I did when I present when I built a presentation for this and the demo. And yeah, again, Apache APISIX is an amazing tools, completely open source, came from the Apache Foundation, and as you can see, we can do a lot of things with this solution, and even changing the behavior of our application that is not meant to be secure, in depth by design. So, well, thanks and have a nice day. Bye.